USB-C has finally come to the iPhone, but what does that mean for charging speeds? Well, I have 4 different Apple chargers here, and I'm going to charge up the iPhone 15 Pro Max from 0 to 100% to see which one charges the fastest, and if the faster charging comes at the expense of added heat, and if so, how much added heat. So we're going to be testing the official Apple 5 watt, 12 watt, 20 watt, and 30 watt chargers in this test. We're going to be using this device to measure the actual power being applied to the phone and a thermal imaging camera to get a sense of the temperature of the phones while they are charging. So last year with the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the Lightning port, we got a maximum charging speed of around 27 watts. So I'm really curious to see if the iPhone 15 Pro Max with USB-C can charge faster than last year's 14 Pro Max. Now, to make sure this is a fair battle, we do have any type of charging optimization disabled. We also have clean energy charging disabled, and I will also be in airplane mode with no Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connected. So that way there is no type of discrepancy between the two in terms of charging speeds. So we're starting with the 20 watt versus the 30 watt, the two most popular chargers that Apple sells. Now the 20 watt actually got to the lock screen first, which I found pretty interesting. And we also hit our peak wattage during this initial boot up after a few seconds. So the 30 watt hit 24.8 watts and the 20 watt hit 18.5 watts. And of course the amperage and the voltage will vary throughout the test, and a lot of it is also based on the amount of charge that the battery has, as you'll see throughout the video. Now, I did also do a thermal test pretty early on and noticed that the 30 watts did heat up the phone a little bit more than the 20 watts, but it was a very, very minor difference and definitely not something that would make a difference to your battery long term. And by the way, the reason I'm not using anything over 30 watts is because the iPhone 15 Pro Max is not capable of charging over 30 watts. So anything over 30 would be overkill and would not make much of a difference when it comes to charging speeds. And also, despite what you may have heard, you do not need to use Apple's provided USB-C cable in order to achieve maximum speeds. Third-party cables work just as well and are also much cheaper. So about an hour into this test, we hit the 80% mark on the 30 watt charger here, and you'll notice that the wattage drops all the way down below 2 watts and at one point even below 1 watt. And it's interesting because I had all of the charging optimization features turned off. There was nothing, slowing down the charge, at least on my end, but it looks like Apple has something built in hardware-wise to, throttle the charging at around 80%. But after we got past that 80% mark at 81%, I did notice that the charging picked up a bit, although we never got back to the original charging speeds that we were getting early on. And you can also see this final temperature check where we have the 20 watts actually producing more heat from the phone than the 30 watt did. So it's pretty interesting. Like I said, there's really not as big of a difference as you would think in terms of temperature when you charge with a 20 watt versus a 30 watt. And then we did finish charging with the 30 watts, and it took 2 hours and 11 minutes to go from 0 to 100% on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And for the 20 watt, it took just 10 minutes more at 2 hours and 21 minutes to go from 0 to 100%. I also tracked the max wattage and the peak temperatures, but I'll show all of that at the end of this video. And then moving on to the 5 watt versus the 12 watt, this is where things got pretty interesting because, me personally, I have not used a 5 watt or a 12 watt charger in a very long time, just because I've not really seen a point in doing it. I know that they do run cooler and they could potentially be better for your battery, but after doing this test, I think a lot of people will have their minds changed because the difference is not as big as you would think. So you can see at around 2 hours in, we're at 64% on the 12 watt versus 39% on the 5 watt. So we always get like pretty much double the battery life on this 12 watt charger. And you can see the wattage down there at around 6.4 versus 4.5 on the 5 watt charger. And then at the 3 hour mark, we got to 87% on the 12 watt versus 59% on the 5 watt. And then eventually we did finish out at 4 hours and 4 minutes on the 12 watt charger. And then I did do a final temperature check on the 12 watt right as it was finishing charging, and it was running cooler than the phone that is being powered by the 5 watt charger, but that's just because we were trickle charging pretty much since 80%. However, I do need to mention that if you're thinking about getting a 5 watt charger just to plug in at night and have it beside your bed, beware, this thing could start a fire. This thing about burnt my leg while I was recording this video. It clocked in at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That is insane. That is 64 degrees hotter than the 30-watt charger. And then the 5-watt eventually finished at 5 hours and 44 minutes. That took way too long for a charger in 2023. Okay, so now let's look at the results. So after 20 minutes of charging the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the 30-watt charger got my phone to 32%, whereas the 20-watt got it to 28%, 12-watt at 11%, and the 5-watt only 4%. That is a 28% spread between the highest charge rate and the lowest. And then you can see for 45 minutes and 1 hour later, but the big difference right here in terms of the overall spread comes at an hour and a half, because at an hour and a half of charging on the 30-watt charger, my iPhone 15 Pro Max was at 89%. On the 20-watt, it was at 85%, 12-watt at 48%, and the 5-watt at only 29%. That is a 60% spread from the 5-watt versus the 30-watt. Now, of course, that's expected. You're not really using a 5-watt charger to charge fast, but it's still pretty crazy. And then let's move over to the final tally. So the 30-watt charger took 2 hours and 11 minutes. The 20-watt took 2 hours and 21 minutes. The 12-watt, 4 hours and 4 minutes. 5-watt, 5 hours and 44 minutes. I did also measure the max wattage. So I watched the clips throughout and kind of just paid attention to see what the max wattage was for each charger. And at 24.8 was the max for the 30 watts, 18.5 was the max wattage for the 20-watt charger, 6.8 was the max for the 12-watt charger, and 4.6 watts was the maximum charging rate for the 5-watt charger. Now here's another interesting tidbit. So I did also look at the peak temperatures for both the phone and the block. So the 30-watt charger gave my iPhone 15 Pro Max a peak temperature of 114 degrees Fahrenheit, and the block got up to 96 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the coolest out of the entire bunch. My phone reached 107 degrees Fahrenheit when charging with the 20 watts, and the block was at 99 degrees. The 12 watt got my iPhone to 96 degrees Fahrenheit, but the block was at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the 5 watt did keep my phone the coolest at 94 degrees Fahrenheit, but the block was 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a 64 degree spread compared to the 30 watts. So my big takeaway from this is that if you still have a 5-watt charger in 2023 and you're trying to charge your iPhone 15 Pro Max, I don't think it's worth it to have a 5-watt. I mean, literally only a 2-degree difference in terms of the phone temperature. So if you're gonna have any type of slow charger, do a 12-watt at the minimum, because again, there's hardly any difference. But even looking at the 20 watts, there's really hardly any difference there either. Only 11 degrees difference in terms of the phone temperature. Yeah, I don't really think that's going to make a big difference long term. So I think the days of slow charging are kind of over, in my opinion. I think the 20 watt doesn't really heat up your phone near as much as some people might think. Now, of course, will the 12 watt and the 5 watt be better for your battery long term? Yes, but how big of a difference is it really going to make? And that's where I'm trying to say, I don't really think it's going to make that big of a difference. I mean, unless you're planning on keeping your phone for 5, 6, 7 years, then maybe. But I think at the end of the day, the 20 watt looks like the best one here, just because it only finished 10 minutes after the 30 watts, and it also stayed cooler. It kept your phone 7 degrees cooler. And really, if you look throughout the test, the 20 watt and the 30 watt only had a maximum of 4% difference in terms of battery levels. So really, you're not really gaining much by going to the 30 watt charger if you have an iPhone 15, 15 Pro, or especially 15 Pro Max. So if you found this video useful, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, if you have any suggestions for future charging tests or battery tests in general, let me know with a comment down below. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.